Shalom to you. We are on our Genesis to Revelations daily Bible study. Today is chapters 4 to 6 of Joshua. In these chapters, Israel will cross over Jordan, the congregation will cross over Jordan, set up a monument. The people will get circumcised because they weren't circumcised in the wilderness because all their previous men had died. And then they will go and attack Jericho, walk around it, and the walls of Jericho will fall. I shall start reading from verse 7 of Joshua of chapter 4. Then you shall answer them that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, when they passed over Jordan. The waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for memorial unto the children of Israel forever. So God wants the historical things he does for his people remembered by future generations, which is why we have the feast days as Passover and so on. And the deceiver would like us not to keep those, so we do not have the memorials of things that God has specifically done for his people. Reading from verse 12. And the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh passed over armed before the children of Israel, as Moses spoke unto them. About 40,000 prepared for war, passed over before Yahweh unto battle, to the plains of Jericho. On that day Yahweh magnified Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him as they feared Moses all the days of his life. Verse 19. And the people came up out of the Jordan on that 10th day of the first month, and encamped in Gilgal, in the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of Jordan did Joshua pitch in Gilgal. And he spoke unto the children of Israel, saying, When your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land. For Yahweh your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you, until you were passed over, as Yahweh your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us, until we were gone over. That all the people of the earth might know the hand of Yahweh, that it is mighty, that you might fear Yahweh your God forever. Now I suggest you read Exodus chapters 12 verse 3 and verse 48, which is the Passover days, the same 10th day of the first month. And also Numbers chapters 9 verses 4 and 13 to do with the circumcision and the Passover. Moving on to chapter 5, reading from verse 1. This is the new generation get circumcised. And it came to pass when all the kings of the Amorites which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites which were by the sea, heard that Yahweh had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel, until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was their spirit in them any more, because of the children of Israel. At that time Yahweh said unto Joshua, Make these sharp knives, and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time. And Joshua made him sharp knives, and circumcised the children of Israel at the heel of their foreskins. And this is the reason why Joshua did circumcise. All the people that came out of Egypt that were males, even all the men of war, died in the wilderness by the way, after they came out of Egypt. Now all the people that came out were circumcised, but all the people that were born in the wilderness by the way, as they came forth out of Egypt, them they had not circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness, till all the people that were men of war which came out of Egypt were consumed, because they obeyed not the voice of Yahweh, unto whom Yahweh swore that he would not show them the land which Yahweh swore unto their fathers that he would give us, a land that floweth with milk and honey. And Yahweh said unto Joshua, This day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you, with the name of the place, wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. And I said you can see also Genesis chapters 34 verse 14 and Leviticus chapters 18 verse 3. So this is a reminder why that some people didn't enter the promised land, or that a promise was made to them, because they failed to keep the condition of entering that promised land. So God makes promises and covenants of taking Israel to the promised land, or us to the new heaven and earth. But remember, it is always conditional on obedience and keeping the terms of that covenant, which is his laws. See Exodus chapters 15 verse 26, 19 verse 5, Deuteronomy 11 verse 13. Continuing from Joshua chapters 5 verse 10. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at evening in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the same day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So, notice of all the times that God could have taken them out of Egypt, he took them out at the beginning of the year. He gave them a new start, his commandments, and a new way of living, his way. And now, coming to the promised land, of all the time of the year, 40 years, they could have brought them to the promised land out of Egypt, or the new beginning with the death of the Messiah. It all happened at Passover. So in other words, they came out of Egypt at the beginning of the year, Passover. They crossed in the promised land at the beginning of the year at Passover. And Messiah died for our sins at Passover, giving us a new beginning and a new year. Or his new year, not these January New Years that people keep today. My point is, new beginnings are not coincidence. Nothing is coincidental with God. He has appointed times and he has specifics that he wants us to follow. Continue from chapter 5 verse 14. And he said, nay, okay, I better tell you a bit of history about this. If you read it, you'll see Joshua sees a man standing with a sword, and he asks the man, has he come to fight for Israel or to fight for their adversaries? And the captain replies, no, he's come as the captain of God's army. He's come to help them. So reading from verse 14. And he said, nay, but as captain of the host of Yahweh am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship, and said unto him, what saith my Lord unto his servants? And the captain of Yahweh's host said unto Joshua, loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereof thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. Now remember the leadership of Exodus chapters 23 verse 20. Behold, I set an angel before thee to keep thee in the way, and also to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. So the same way God sent a leader for them to keep them in this way at that time, God has now sent them assistance in the form of this captain of the host to lead them into battle. Last chapter for today, chapter 6, reading from verse 1. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And Yahweh said unto Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And you shall compass the city, all you men of war, and go around about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns, and the 7th day. And he carries on giving instructions of what they are to do. So Jericho had barricaded themselves in because they're afraid to let anyone in or out of the city or lead the way in for their enemies, or maybe no one wanted to go out. But from this story If he says do something on the 7th, do not do it on the 1st, nor expect his blessings on the 1st. We shall see the same principle with Naaman at 2 Kings chapters 5, verse 10 and verse 14. For those words to come tumbling down, Joshua and the people had to obey the words of God, which was basically they were to walk around the wall and not to say a thing until the 7th day when he told them to shout. Had they spoken or shouted before, it wouldn't have got the blessing. Continuing from verse 18. And you in any wise keep your souls from the accursed thing, lest you make your souls accursed, when you take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel accursed, and trouble it. But all the silver and gold, and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto Yahweh. They shall come into the treasury of Yahweh. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. So you should have read the whole chapter, but basically they're saying that when they plunder the city, they are not to take anything of themselves onto themselves. Everything's to go to Yahweh, and I'll explain why in a minute. And if they do take anything into themselves, it will be a curse for the whole nation. Other verse associated with this chapter, the verse above, is Deuteronomy chapters 20, verses 10 to 18, and Romans chapter 18, Romans chapter 1, verse 18 to 32. So, points we can note. Only what God says is blessed is blessed. We cannot make something holy. So if God picks a time, place, or method, we are to obey it. We have learned those who do not, even prophets as Moses, are not excused. Here, all the spoils of the battle are for God's treasury. This is because it is the first fruits, the first battle. Exodus chapters 23, verse 19 explains that. We shall see the spoils of subsequent battles will be for the people. So the principle of first fruits is being practiced. Continuing to read from verse 25. And Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive, and her father's household, all that she had, and she dwelleth in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. And Joshua abhorred them at that time, saying, Cursed be the man before Yahweh that riseth up and buildeth this city, Jericho. He shall lay the foundation thereof in his firstborn, and his youngest son shall he set up the gate. And in his youngest son shall he set up the gates of it. Verse 27. So Yahweh was with Joshua, and his fame was noised throughout all the country. So we should know the reason why Rahab was saved and her family from yesterday's reading. Rahab's family now become part of the congregation of Israel. They're taken in. She even becomes famous and an ancestor of the Messiah. We see this in Matthew chapters 1 verse 5 and Hebrews chapters 11 verse 31. Hebrews 11:31 says her faith was shown by her actions. So, with faith and obedience to God's law, anyone can be part of the congregation of Israel or of God. That is the gospel message. Acts 10:34. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, Of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and work of righteousness is accepted with him. And that's what happened with Rahab. The curse of verse 26 shall fall on heel in 1 Kings chapter 16 verse 34. Now going back to verse 19, chapter 4, after crossing the Jordan, Israel camped at Gilgal for a while before the conquest of Canaan began. Now several things happened at Gilgal which signified that the wilderness wandering was over and that Israel was embarking on a new phase of her national history, as I said happened in the first month of the year. First, Joshua had the people set up 12 stones as a monument of the miraculous drying up of the Jordan for the crossing. That's in verse 19 to 24. And to
formidable stronghold, the implications are more spiritual than political, just like in Egypt when he brought the plagues against the Egyptians. While God was bringing judgment upon those who had long refused him, he was working on behalf of the people with whom he had just renewed his covenant. The fall of Jericho sent a powerful message to the Canaanites that Israel's success were not mere human victories of man against man, but victories by the true God of Israel over their gods. Which is why when they heard that God had dried up the rivers, they got afraid. This event followed closely upon the crossing of the Jordan by miraculous means, of which the wall came down.
They thought that their stronghold was impregnable. Now, the most recent archaeological research at Jericho has confirmed the Bible's account that the city was destroyed about 1400 BC. Shalom and to